From learning a block Gemara, we are up to the Lamed Tes of an Aleph. This is the Gemara for Friday, Yud Daled Nisan, Erev Pesach. So we're up to the two dots, about 20 lines at the top of the page. So the Mishnah says, Konsa, if the Yavam, the brother-in-law, finally married his sister-in-law, Harehi Kishta, in every respect, halachically is considered his wife. Says the Gemara, Lemay Hilchasa. In which respect are we referring to? Because obviously, once they get married, they get married. Allow me to tell you, that now she's no longer considered a sister-in-law Yevamos, she's considered just his wife. So therefore, if things don't work out, you just have to issue a divorce. No more chalitz or anything like that. And then again, he can take her back if afterwards they make up, and he can remarry her, provided he's not a kohen. He says the Gemara first, Megar Shebeyet. You tell me that he can divorce her with a get. Pshita. Of course he has divorced with a get. They're now husband and wife. Salka data we know. We would have thought, the pasuk says, she should take her as a wife, the yibma, and they are married as brother-in-law and his brother's wife. That's what the Torah said. So I would have thought that even after the marriage, she's always considered like a Yevama. And therefore, if she's still considered a Yevama, for whatever reason they want to terminate this relationship, you would think that you have to pursue it just like a Bayo Yevama, which is b'chalitza in beget loy. You should give a chalitza and not a get. Kamash Malan, that no, in every respect is like a wife. Says the Gemara Marzila, he can take her back if they divorce. He can take her back. Since it's like a wife, like any other wife, you divorce, you can take her back. Says the Gemara, no. I would have thought mitzvah of them. The only reason why he's allowed to marry his sister-in-law is because you have a mitzvah of yibum. So now that you've been married and you divorced, so you've discharged your mitzvah. So it reverts back to the Isser of your sister-in-law, and you no longer have the right to marry her. In fact, it's an Aveda. Kamashalan, that's not so. Once she transitions to become your wife, there's no longer any more the status of a Yevama. So how do you talk know? Maybe she's still considered a Yevama. And the pasuk says, "You should take her as a wife." It says "li isha." What do you mean? What's the word Isha? Why is it to write the word Isha? Once you marry her, she has all the status of a wife. Then the Mishnah says, should take Ksuvasa. The Ksuva comes from actually the first husband, not Shimon, but from Reuven. That's because she married Reuven initially, so therefore Reuven's estate has to pay her Ksuva. Says the Gemara, my time, why Taki is that so? If she's considered Shimon's wife, then the estate should come from Shimon's estate. So the Gemara, usually a wife is something that you choose. Here you have no choice. The Eibishter gave you this wife, the sister-in-law. It says mitzvah min hashamayim, and therefore I never indebted my estate to this ksuva. And Shimon, the Yavam, can sell whenever he wants. But the less lamination, if the first husband has no estate, then to kinyalam b'sheni. Then we instituted they should take the money from Shimon. If he knows there's any ksuva, doesn't pay her out, he will treat her lightly, and things don't work out, they'll just toss her out of the house. So therefore, we say that he has to give his own money for the ksuva. So at the end of the day, so what do we gain? Either way, she gets her ksuva, and he has to give it. So what's the difference? What exactly did we achieve over here? So we achieved is that the Yavam, Shimon, let's say, can sell his fields, and even afterwards, Reuven's fields dried up, and there's no longer any assets by Reuven. You could no longer go back to the sold items of Shimon and say, retrieve it, let's give it back. Because in an ordinary case of a wife, yes, because her ksuva predates the buyers, and if she has nowhere to collect the ksuva from, she can go to all the fields that were sold and take it back. But in this case over here, he can't. Because when Shimon sold the fields, there was still assets left in Reuven, so he had every right to. It's only a special takana that a Reuven has no longer any assets and go to Shimon, but not in this instance. Mishnah. The mitzvah because of the oldest brother should be the one who meyabim to go and perceive the yibum. Loyrotz, if he refuses, mahalchan kolach, and then you go to all the other brothers, you ask them, loyrotz, so they refuse. Chayznes, you go back to the oldest one. We tell the oldest one, alecha mitzvah, you have that mitzvah. It's your choice. Either you give her chalitza or you marry her. What about Tola B'Katan? Let's say he says, let's wait for the younger one here. That Achi Yagdul under Bar Mitzvah until this cotton grows up, be posed by Mitzvah, so that if he wants, he can marry her. The Godel actually, the Godel museum, or let's say the Godel is not here. So let's wait till the Godel comes back from overseas before we pursue further. There's another brother who's a Chedesh, and let's wait till they get cured. We don't listen just to procrastinate. We don't. We say to him, we say to the Godel, either the mitzvah is on you, either give chalitza or go ahead and be miyabim. The Gemara will explain. So the Gemara, even though the brother overseas is older than you, if you're now the oldest one living here, then you should be the one to either give chalitza or to get married. As the Gemara will explain, we don't want to delay mitzvah. Says the Gemara. It can be learned. B is cotton chalitza god. We have an interesting choice here. The younger one is more than happy to marry her, but the older one would prefer to give chalitza. So what's preferred? Is what's more important, the fact that it's the oldest one who's involved, and therefore that's all they want to give chalitza, so be it, or the most important thing is that they should actually marry, so we can continue the legacy of Reuven. So if it's the younger one who prefers to do that, so let's give it to the younger one. So the B of a cotton is better because the most important thing is to leave a lasting legacy for Reuven. No, the Gadol is the most important thing. If chalitza, so be it. Mandam is going to leave the mitzvah, even the mitzvah is yibum, and therefore whoever it is, it is. Mandam chalitza Gadol, adifa makom Gadol, adifa makom Gadol, because Gadol have klumi. The main thing is a Gadol. Even though the younger ones is prepared to do to have relations, it doesn't have matter. So let's go for focus on our Mishnah. Now we look at our Mishnah. If the oldest one refuses, machzina kolach go to all the brothers. Now, what do you mean he didn't want? What didn't he want to do? My love, he said, I don't want to marry her, but I'm happy to give chalitza. And yet it says, let's go to the other ones. Maybe they want to marry her. Doesn't that prove that the younger marriage is more important and takes precedence over an older one giving chalitza? It doesn't that prove that B is cotton not different. Better have relations even with the younger one. Talking about a lie, no proof whatsoever. I can interpret it a bit differently. He didn't want to give chalitza. He refused to give either. The God didn't want to get involved. I'm not interested in giving chalitza. I'm not interested in the whole process. I'm not interested in yibum. So the Gemara asked, so the kavasi gamachim, we went to all the other brothers. They all said the same thing. Loy ratzu means loy lachles loy yabim. So why did then we go back to the Gadol? Amai chayzim meitzla Gadol. Why do we go back to the oldest one? Nobody wants to do anything. So why go back to the oldest one? So the Gemara lemichafir. If we're going to have to force somebody, we're going to force the oldest one. So the Gemara, why the oldest one? L'chafir to do. The last person that we spoke to, if he refuses, the youngest one, let's force them. So the Gemara right now thinks that everyone has an equal mitzvah. It's just like a hidur that the oldest one should do it. But when it comes to forcing, you don't force on hidur mitzvah. So therefore, whatever one we're up to, that's the one that we should force. So what answers, keeping the mitzvah because he has the mitzvah. It's not just a hidur mitzvah. In fact, the main mitzvah is for the oldest one to do it. And therefore, if the oldest one doesn't do it, if the younger one doesn't want to have beer, we go to the oldest one. And nobody wants to do it, we go back to the oldest and force it, because that's where the mitzvah lies. Okay, the next part of the mission tonight we learn let's wait for the younger one to mature. Ain't shaming, we don't listen. Now the EB is cut not deeper. If you can tell me that a younger one's relationship is better than an older chalitza, am I ain't shaming, why taka don't we wait? Ninta, let's wait. Dilma Godel. Maybe when he'll grow up, Umayabim is more than happy to give Yibum. Says he back, the time according to you. Ubi Godel, it says further in the Mishnah, but the older one actually if he says, look, the oldest one is overseas. Why come to me? I'm the oldest one locally, but there's an older brother overseas. Let's wait till he comes back. Ain't Shemilai. Am I wine into why we will wait till he comes back from overseas? Because maybe he's more than happy to marry her. Or at least give chalitza. We do not like to delay mitzvah. So therefore, it doesn't prove anything. The fact that we say we don't listen to when you tell us the cotton is not because beer doesn't matter and it's all different chalitza beer. It's because we don't want to delay mitzvahs. East Dam is another version, but very similar. The version goes as follows. The beer is when it comes to relations, no argument. The beer is cotton differ that if the cotton is prepared to marry and the older one merely wants to do chalitza, definitely you go to the cotton because the main purpose is lahak Hashem lach. If you want to leave a lasting legacy. Kipligi, the argument is the chalitza's cotton. The whole argument is what happens if the cotton is prepared to do chalitza and the older one do chalitza. Is there any difference? Is there any priorities when it comes to chalitza or not? Chalitza cotton God will pligi, but if relate, that's the argument. Chadon is going to be better to the older one. Chadon, but Chadon is the same. Man, the chalitza God will be better to go to the older one. The mitzvah begadol, the mitzvah is begadol. The idach can when you say mitzvah begadol in yibum, the chalitza God the same thing. Now, how do we view chalitza? Is chalitza also like a mitzvah of yibum, just a different option, or is chalitza just merely a get? We're separating the relationship to enable her to get married, but you're not actually fulfilling in any sense the proactive mitzvah of continuing the legacy. And that's the argument here. If it's merely to sever the ties, nothing more than that, then what's the difference? Which one does it? But if it's more like a mitzvah, and this is another way of dealing with that relationship, then it should be the goal. So we'll go through the same Mishnah, our Mishnah. Tanan, it says, Loi Rotzu, they refused, the oldest one didn't refuse. Chayzen, sorry, if all the brothers refused, we go back to the Gadol. What do you mean they refused? My love, Loi Rotzu liyab malach. All they want to do is chalitza nadibum. Tony, it says, even chalitza, Chayzen is the Gadol, it's the chalitza alone, also go back to the oldest one. Ushmamina chalitza Gadol, that even when it comes to the realm of chalitza, better go to the Gadol. Does you want to know, no proof? Who told you that we're talking about the chalitza? Like the younger that none of them want to do chalitza, maybe we're talking about yibum. Sorry, loy rotzu, loy lach, they don't want to do anything. None of the brothers want to do either chalitza or yibum, and that's why we go back to the gadol, because someone has to do something. Not the shadi that the younger one said we'll do chalitza, and the chalitza the young one is not at all, and still. And you wanted to prove that they refused to do yibum, but they're happy to do chalitza. We said, oh, you want to do chalitza, let's go back to the gadol. No, they wanted to do nothing, and because they wanted to do nothing, we go back to the gadol. So the Gemara asks, so what did the gadol want to do? Also nothing. Why are we going back to the older one to do what? So we answer the mechafi, to force him to go ahead and give the chalitza. So I asked the Gemara, so why don't you just give force even the younger ones? Why after the older one? So we answer, keep the mitzvah because it's a mitzvah, proactive mitzvah. This is another way of dealing with that relationship. We go back to the God. Toshma coming here, it says in the Mishnah further, he said, let's wait for the older one to come back from overseas. We don't listen. If you're going to tell me that chalitza is God ladifa, if you're going to tell me that the chalitza of the adult is better, why don't we wait for the God to come back? Let him do chalitza. Maybe he'll be more than happy to chalitza. We don't even have to force. So he has back with time, maybe but cotton that if he says, let's wait for the younger one till he grows up. Ain't shame listen. And my why Ninta, let's wait till we go to the maybe we'll do better. Maybe we'll actually be make yibum as well. Elakoshi mitzalation. The reason is we don't want to delay. Same thing here. The godly we don't want to delay. Even you want to argue that chalitza godly is better, but not if the guy is overseas. Talking about chalitza and yibum, so is there any priority one over the other or not? As we learned, and the famous machlekes of Abba Shol and Chachamim, Abba Shol's of the opinion that yibum should take precedence over chalitza, but not anymore. As we learned, mitzvahs yibum kedemis mitzvahs chalitza. The mitzvah of yibum takes precedence over the chalitza. Obviously, lahakim shein laachi. But he's showing in the beginning, Shem Mitzvah in those days when they did Shem Shemayim. But Achshav today, Shein Mitzvah today, that we don't mean Shem Shemayim anymore. They say mitzvahs chalitza kedemis mitzvah given today because we don't do the Shem Shemayim, then chalitza takes precedence over yibum. What is it? So Omar Rav says, Ein koifim. We do not force. What do you mean not force? If the Yavam and the Yevama are happy to get married, even today, we'll allow them to get married. We're not going to give them any force and give chalitza. Even though we can argue that, as we'll soon see, that we say there's a possibility. Abba Shol says that you have to do Shem Shemayim. If you don't, it's almost like you're living in sin, and the children are almost like Mamzedim. If they both agree to go ahead with the Yibum, we are not going to force them to give chalitza and so on. But if he wants to go ahead with the yibum and she gives all kinds of excuses as long as the reasonable is not interested, we're not going to force them at all. And to the yibum, and we're going to try to trick the yavam into giving chalitza. We'll promise him money, even though we know have no intention whatsoever of paying him a cent. And that's how Rashi learns. Taisa disagrees. In Halach itself, that we find different Sfardim and Ashkenazim where Sfardim do go ahead with Yibum and Ashkenazim do not. So the Gemara gives the Gemara. We said, if once they came, Yevamos came over to Rav, he said to them, look, you have a choice. Iboy is chalitz, Iboy is yibum. And he says, if you want, give chalitz. If you want, give yibum. But the doctor Rachman, it's totally up to you, because the Torah says the im lo yach b'zish, only if the guy doesn't want to. But if he wants to, Iboy chalitz, Iboy yibum. He has a total choice. But after Rabbi Yehuda Sabar and Kaita Yehuda also hold that we don't force them, we give them the choice. With asking Rabbi Yehuda B'Kid Chalitza, they made a divorce for Chalitza. There's a special text that they wrote it, and in there it says they plainly about plainly this woman, not Rabbi Yas plainly Yavam brought forward her brother-in-law the Yavam before a bezdin b'ishtem, and we found out, became known to us that this person, this Yavam, was actually a brother of the deceased, on the paternal brother. Amlos, we say to him, eat some of the yam. If you want to marry her, marry. Be law. If not, eat le stretch out your right foot. Eat le and he did stretch out his right foot. He showed us in Malarvayu, and she took his shoe off from his leg. And then she spat before him, spit. It was chazila beidina. Out of the best notice, she go on the ground, and it went on the ground. So we see clearly from here that we give a choice to the Yavim Yavam, they want to get married or not. Chibarav Yemasayim B'Masher Yehuda, and if you're a Chibarav, you're sticking to the name of Yehuda. Akrinu Madachsi B'Seiberais, and we'll read before the Bezdin what it's written in the Torah, the Moshe. It was written in the Torah Moshe, where the pasuk says that if the person doesn't want to, it's clearly depending on the person. It says we notify the Bezdin that this is a brother, a paternal brother. You need mamash witnesses. Being a relative, even a woman. Because it's easier to find out. It's only really telling us a fact that is so easy to find out, and therefore I feel a kaddish, I feel isha. Anybody can be a witness, even halachically they don't have the halach of a witness. Anybody can be. But Shayim was kabel l'shem mitzvah in the beginning, in the olden days when they did l'shem shabai mitzvahs yibum kaidemes the mitzchalitz ideally should yibum, so that we can continue the legacy of the deceased. If people don't really do it for the sake of a mitzvah, we say mitzvahs chalitza kodemes l'zibum. We say then that the mitzvah chalitza takes priority over the mitzvahs of yibum. Later on, changed their mind and said mitzvahs yibum kodemes mitzvah chalitza. Later on, years later, they say, you know what? Maybe mitzvah yibum does take precedence of chalitza. Says the Gemara, the famous words, Ach Dora. Are you telling me that the later generations are better than the early generations? So the Gemara explains. Because I'd rather go better. First, before that law like Abba show, all of the safe at the end they changed their mind and Savri look it up. What's the story? It's handing but I Abba Shalom and if somebody marries his sister only because she's pretty, because he's pushing his wife. Since you're doing it for ulterior motive, not for the sake of a mitzvah, to continue your brother's legacy, as if you're living with your sister-in-law, which you're allowed to. To me, my eyes, I look at this kid almost like a mamzer. And the Chum disagree. They say, what your intentions are. The mitzvah is you have to go through the motions, and that's the mitzvah of Yibum. So the Gemara, so how do we explain the following? But I learned, it says in the pasuk, Yevamos should come on her, mitzvah, first, there was a time that was totally permitted. I'll soon explain what we're referring to. Then Nesser, then it became forbidden. And then it became permitted again. Yochol would have thought, well, it reverts back to its original heter. Now it's a mitzvah. What exactly are you trying to say? We're going to have two different interpretations as to what the Brais is trying to say. Mantana. He says, Abba Sholi. The author of this Brais is Abba Shol, and we'll explain how it works. That the Yevamos should have relations is a mitzvah. What do you mean? This woman you could have married for any ulterior motive. You want to marry for beauty, you want to marry because you need a wife, whatever it is. I don't care what your ulterior motive is. There's no problem. Nesra, then when she married your brother, she became asati. Then the chazar v'huter, when your brother predeceased you, and now there's a mitzvah of yibum. Yochel, I thought tax she goes back to the original way. I don't care what you have in mind. I don't care if you have a ulterior motive. you fulfill the mitzvah. Even Tam Lema, you the mitzvah. You must have in mind a mitzvah. So Yishmael learns that goes to have a show, and that is talking about the person that you have to have in mind L'Shem Shemayim. Because there's two options of doing it, L'Shem Shemayim and not L'Shem Shemayim. You need to do L'Shem Shemayim. Rava says no. I feel Temer Rabbanan, even for the Rabbanan, that you never needed L'Shem Shemayim. Not then and not now. So what changed? Before you had an option. As a woman as a stranger, you had to marry. No, Rav told the Kain says the Kain is up to you. Then Nessa then became Muslim because he married brother. Then when your brother passed away, not your brother, sorry. When your brother passed away, now you can go marry this woman. I would have thought it goes right back to the original way. It's up to me whether I want to marry or not. So you might jump straight away. What do you have a choice not to marry her? She's a Yevama. They're attached. They just leave that attachment just like that. Say like this. If you want, you can marry. If you want, you give chalitza. You have a choice. So what is the mitzvah? So according to Chachamim, forget about your kavanas. We don't care about your kavanas. All it means is before it was option. Now there is a mitzvah. That was a mitzvah. Want to marry her? I'll say Yevamos. Said the Gemara, okay, not very, but I also have a very similar expression. The first part of the Raisa, I talked about another mitzvah. Same thing, it was permitted, became also, then permitted again, but not exactly the way it was before. How do we explain that? But the Gemara, the beginning of the Raisa says, matzahs, says the Pasuk, matzahs, the Mokum Kodesh in a holy place. So we dash as follows: mitzvah shebitchila haisala b'chal het, that which was committed before Nesra became us. Then the chazra b'hutra, well, before you, but it's talking about you made a carbon mincha, and then the leftovers that the kohanim eat. So when before it was a carbon mincha, you could have done whatever you wanted. Then you made it also when you made it a carbon mincha, then it's forbidden until you did the kmitza and you put the pot on the bech. You took the kmitza and you put it on the bech. And Yochav would have thought, I would have thought that the rest, the shirayim of that mincha, the leftover from that flour offering, I would have thought it goes back to its original heter. We'll see what that means. You should eat in the Mokum Kodesh. There's still the restrictions. Mitzvah, it's a mitzvah. Now, Bishlema Rabba says, not do with intention or unintentional. According to Rabba, before it was optional, and now it's a mitzvah. Same thing here. Before the flour you can eat, you don't eat, it's up to you. Then you want, you can eat it, well, you don't have to eat it. So you want to ask a question. Those when it comes to the carbon part itself, it's optional whether the kohen should eat or not. How can it be? Well, see, it says that they should eat those that are forgiven from it. We learn that not only is a mitzvah for kohen to eat from the kabbanis in order to fulfill the kapara. Rashi elsewhere says that even if it's, let's say, Shlomim or the Yisrael, even the Bailim, the owners also have a mitzvah to eat as part of the kapara. But the kohen definitely have a mitzvah. Now, which particular kohen? Rashi says here, interesting. Rashi holds over that the very kohen who brought this carbon should be the one that is eating it, the one that avodah. And Tosha says it could mean the entire family, not just this particular kohen has a mitzvah to eat. According to the first answer, at least. Second one agrees with Rashi. Ella, we learn this. Ratza who ratza kohen achrech. In the beginning, it doesn't matter if you eat it, somebody else eats it. That's the way. So we would have thought, just like before, permitted. Then it became also again carbon, and now they're permitted. Just like before the carbon, anybody can eat it. Any kohen, same over here, any kohen can eat it. Matzahs to archa b'makom kodesh mitzvah. Now it's a mitzvah, and the mitzvah is that the very kohen who did the avodah should be eating from it. Okay, makes sense. That turned something which is heter into a mitzvah. He says Abba Shol has to do with intention, and there are two ways of doing it, either with the Turi motive or not. And it come and tell you that before you could have done either way. Now you can only do it one way. So how you learn that with the carbon by the matzahs of the carbon? What are the two possibilities that before was all right, and now there's a carbon that came mutter again? It's not all right. You could have eaten it before it was a carbon. You could have eaten it just as a chilagasa. That means you're full already. You need to continue eating, or you're hungry. I think Moravi jumps on that. If you're full, and you continue stuffing yourself, is that called food eating? If somebody eats achila gasa ayam kiki potter, it says you should not punish yourself, and that is only something that, but not if you're denying yourself food. But here, it's not called eating. There's no joy in it. Before, you could eat it either in the form of matzah or in the form of chametz. And what we're talking about, you said there's two ways. You could either eat in the form of matzah or the form of chametz. How can it be? It says the pasuk, like say, you should not bake mincha chametz chelkom the shir. Now, normally the chelkom goes on the rest of the pasuk, and the shir goes to the kohanim. But we'll put a comma after the chelkom. That even the cheler ends up in the kohanim. You have to make sure it's not chametz. I feel the chelkom like say for chametz. Should make a chametz. Ella rotza matzah. Yeah, but what's the choice? The choice is you can eat it either as matzah rotza chalut. You can have it either as matzah, or you take the flour and you boil it up in the water, and then you take it and you bake it. And so you might ask, what do you mean you boil it in the water, the flour, the dough? If it's technically matzah, hamatzi, so it's matzah, what's the problem? The lay matzi, then how could you think you can do it? Matzah is amarachmana. Matzi, it is matzah. It is definitely matzah, and we'll see in the Gemara, Pesach if you boil the dough in hot water. So why did you repeat the pasuk again to be ma'akiv? But not when it comes to a carbon. When it comes to carbon, I don't want you to use chalut at all. So that's the limitation. So two options are either you bake it or chalut, and now it's only chalut. And chalut matzi. In what way is it matzah? On Pesach, you can be yetch in the chalut. Afapi, even though the chalte. Even though you put in the water first, even the harder afya betana, because you bake it afterwards, lechem oini karina. It's called the poor man's bread. You are yetze with it on Pesach proper, and therefore that is the two possibilities, the two ways, and that's how we learn according to Vimai. Tesa wants to learn from here that then Thomas Mechadish that right here, Tesa Mechadish that. Bread, if it's made out of flour and water, even if you don't bake it, it has a dinner bread. If it's from a heavy batter, it's only if it's from a thin batter that you have to bake it to turn into bread. Most of the trainers agree, but that's what Tesa says here in Name of Rabbeinu Tam. That ends today. Think about it. Everyone have a good day and a kosher and freilich and Pesach.